All right, welcome back. Today, we are diving into a really big question, one that gets right to the very heart of how a democracy works. Who actually gets to pick the judges?
I mean, really think about that for a second. Should it be the government that you and I vote for, or should the judiciary, the courts themselves, get to choose their own? This isn't just some dusty legal puzzle. It's a massive test of where the real power lies in a country.
Okay, so before we can even get into the case, we've got to talk about the core principle at stake here. And trust me, it is a huge one: judicial independence. This is basically the bedrock, the foundation of any fair justice system.
So, what does that actually mean in practice? Well, it means a judge should be able to make a call based only on the law and the facts in front of them. No looking over their shoulder, worrying about what the government or some other powerful group thinks. It's kind of like a firewall, right? It's there to protect the rule of law from politics.
All right, so with that in mind, let's look at how this whole idea was seriously put to the test. We're about to get into a landmark case that really set the stage on this issue for decades. Let's set the scene. The year is 1981. A case lands at the Supreme Court, SP Gupta versus the Union of India. Now, that's the official name, but its legacy is so much bigger. In fact, most people know it by a different name. The first judge's case, and the central issue was crystal clear. Who has the final word in appointing judges? This was it. This was the showdown between the power of the executive and the independence of the judiciary. And what's so fascinating here is that this huge, massive constitutional fight really boiled down to the meaning of just two little words. The entire debate hinged on the difference between consultation and concurrence. So let's break that down. Consultation basically means the government has to ask the Chief Justice for their opinion. But that opinion isn't binding, it's just advice. Concurrence, on the other hand, that means they have to agree. It has to be a mutual decision. See the difference? One is a suggestion, the other is essentially a veto. The stakes were absolutely massive. So yeah, it all boils down to this. Was the Chief Justice of India meant to be just an advisor in this whole process? Or were they a full-on equal partner whose agreement was mandatory? Whatever the court decided was going to completely reshape the power dynamic. And this, of course, brings us to the moment of truth. After all the arguments were made, the Supreme Court had to deliver its verdict. It had to define that critical word, and in doing so, define the balance of power. So, what did they decide? Did the court say consultation really means agreement, to protect its own turf? Or did it hand over the final say to the government? The court came down, and it came down hard, on the side of the executive. In a really decisive and pretty controversial ruling, it declared that the primacy in appointments, the final word, rested with the government. So let's get into the details of that ruling. First off, they made it super clear. Consultation does not mean concurrence, period. This meant the Chief Justice's opinion wasn't the final word. Now, they did stress that the consultation had to be full and effective. It couldn't just be a formality. But here's the kicker. If there was a disagreement, the ultimate power was with the union government. The thinking here seemed to be about democratic accountability, right? The idea that the elected government, the one that answers to the voters, should have the final say. So after the dust settled, the new reality was crystal clear. The Chief Justice of India, they had to be consulted. That was mandatory. But the union government, they were now the ultimate authority. The buck stopped with them. So what did this all mean in the real world? Well, the impact was huge, and its legacy is something that is still being debated even today. The most immediate effect was plain to see. The scales of power tipped, and they tipped big time, right towards the executive branch. The government now officially had the legal backing to have the final say on who gets to be a judge. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just some small temporary change. The first judge's case set a major legal precedent. It basically wrote the rules of the game between the courts and the government for more than a decade. It's a truly foundational chapter in India's constitutional history. And that leaves all of us with a pretty deep question, one that every democracy really has to wrestle with. In that delicate balance between an elected government and an independent judiciary, who do you actually trust to hold the final key to the halls of justice?